Good morning. Welcome. My name is Jennifer Johnson. My pronouns are she and hers, and I am so glad and grateful to be the lead minister here at First Parish in Concord. First Parish is a member of the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, and love lies at the center of our faith. We gather to grow spiritually and ethically together as we adapt to a changing world. With humility and reverence, we acknowledge our place in the great web of life, and we embrace our differences and commonalities with openness and goodwill. Welcome to all of you who are joining us both here in our historic sanctuary and over Zoom. If you are visiting or new to the congregation, we extend especially warm greetings to you. If you need assistance during the worship service and you're here in the sanctuary, you may see one of our ushers at the rear of the sanctuary. They can provide you with assisted listening devices or direct you to what we call the wiggle room downstairs, where young ones can play while the service streams on a large screen. All ages are invited to utilize our Soulworks materials, if you wish, that are at the entrance of the sanctuary. They're small crafts and coloring pages that can help calm the body and focus the mind. Please join us immediately following the service for a coffee hour in the parish hall downstairs. A representative of our governing board will be available to greet you and answer your questions. And today our rep is Jen Izzo. So Jen's going to stand up. She has a blue scarf on, and she's available to speak with you. If you prefer a more intimate space to reflect on the themes of worship, you are invited to join the Worship Reflection Circle, which also takes place immediately after the service, and it's in the Brooks Room downstairs. Welcome once again. To gather in worship is a sacred act, and your presence among us is a blessing. We are glad and grateful that you are here. In our Unitarian Universalist tradition, we begin our worship by kindling the flame of the chalice, the symbol of our faith. May its light inspire us to be beacons of love and justice in a beautiful and broken world. And I invite you to join us in new chalice lighting words of response for the month of February, on the theme of inclusion. Please rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn, Dear Weaver of Our Lives' Designs. Here we are. There's something about marking the dates on the calendar this year, something about facing where we are. It's been a week or two, has it not? It's not easy to bear witness to the powers that be, living up to their promises to build walls and tear down communities, to sow chaos, to raid and deport and exclude and deny and enforce and blame. It has not been easy on our hearts and spirits, on our bodies, and especially so for those most directly impacted by the cruelty. So it is good and right that we have gathered to hold fast to our values, to tend to our hearts, and strengthen our spirits. It is good and right that on this Sunday, we begin our exploration of our monthly theme, the practice of inclusion. The practice of inclusion. It is good and right that once again we affirm our deepest aspiration to be a beloved community of welcome and inclusion, healing and joy, openness, wonder, and kindness, with love always at the center. Feels especially good to me and especially right to me this morning to call us to worship with words of my colleague, the Reverend Ian Riddle. Come one, come all, come with your missing pieces and your extra screws. Come with your hard edges and your soft spots. Come with your bowed heads and upright spines. Come, all you flamboyant and drab, verbose and quiet, fidgeting and lethargic, all you with large vision and tender hearts, all you with small courage and tender fears. Bring your lisp and your stutter and your song. Bring your gravel and your drawl and your lilt. Bring your anger and your joy and your righteous indignation. Misfits and conformists and everyone in between, come into this space and be welcome. Bring who you are. Bring where you've traveled. Bring what you long for. And let us worship together.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Amy Friedman. I serve as your Minister of Religious Education. And this is the third Sunday that I am inviting children who wish to come forward to the first pew or to sit down here. You may also stay where you are if you prefer. But it is an opportunity for you to be a little bit closer. And if you would like to do that, I'll give you time to do that now. Our time for all ages is indeed for everyone in our community, and many times I tell stories, but this morning I'm going to share a spiritual practice. You can find a spot there with Dawn and Anderson and Beth, and we used to do this all the time before COVID hit. There's plenty of room over here, and kids used to actually sit right here, down here on the floor, and maybe that'll happen again someday. We'll see. Ever evolving in our faith and in our practice. Got spot? You want to move that? Let's move that a little bit over. So you have, are you comfortable? Gabby, are you sure you're comfortable? Okay, great. We need a spot for Xanthi. Hooray! They're going to model sitting on the floor. Hey, nice. You never know what's going to happen in the Time for All Ages. So this morning, the Time for All Ages comes from Jack Kornfield. And some of you may know him well. He is a psychologist. He's someone who's founded Buddhist communities and Buddhist centers in the United States. And he's also a teacher of mindfulness. And I know many of you know about mindfulness, both in your schools and here at First Parish. And the first invitation, sometimes I ask you a question at the end of the story. Today I'm going to ask you a question at the beginning of our practice, okay? So this question is, when in your life have you felt a sense of openness, spaciousness, and feeling loving? And the example that Jack Kornfield gives was walking on the side of a mountain, or looking up at the nighttime sky filled with stars, or when he welcomed a new child into his family. For him, those were times when he felt this sense of being open, spacious, and loving. Now, for me, when I have that feeling that I think he's trying to describe, it's when I go to the ocean. Whenever I go to the ocean, and whether it's just to be near it and to hear the sound of the crashing waves, or to walk along the shore and have those waves kind of dance along my feet, or when I plunge into the cold water, I feel that sense of openness, spaciousness, greater feeling of loving, of being held in the world. I wanted to know from you guys, and maybe some of you, when have you felt that way? Yeah. Around my family. Anybody else? When I smell flowers. Anybody else? Grown-ups, you can speak loudly out to us if you have an idea of a place or a time that you had that feeling. Don't be shy. At church! Hooray! That makes me singing in harmony. Walking in the woods. Camping. I heard the word snow. Will you say it again? When it starts to snow. Say it again. Under a cloudless sky. Thank you for looking at the stars. Thank you for all the things that you said, and whatever it is that you hold in your mind. Maybe someone else named something and you're like, oh, that's it too. One more, the last one. Wow, very specific. Going camping in the backyard and watching a movie on an iPad. With your dad. I forgot an important thing. With your dad. Thank you. I invite you to connect with that place for you, where you feel a sense of being open, expansive, and loving. Take a moment and just stretch, let go of some tension. If you can, allow your feet to touch the floor. And if you can't, that's okay too. And bring into your mind's eye that time or that place. Remember how you felt in your body, how it feels in your heart. And let your mind and body be quiet. Allow your eyes to close if you're comfortable doing so. Take a deep breath. Let it go. Feel the same vastness of the here and now. Relax and become the space of loving awareness that can allow the sun to shine, storm clouds, gain and loss, the world endlessly giving birth to itself, all with your gracious and peaceful heart. If you want to, you can put a hand on your heart. Take another deep breath. Feel the beating of your heart and the cycle of your breath nourishing you. Rest in love. Rest in love. Let's share a moment of stillness together. If you're not already, wiggle your fingers and wiggle your toes and allow your eyes to open and look around at all these people sharing this space with you. Stretch if you want to. Jack Kornfield writes, "Spaciousness, awareness, and love are intertwined. So let's carry our spacious minds and our loving hearts with us, at least through the rest of today, and if we can, through the rest of our week together." So today in our religious exploration, we are going to be exploring the idea of transformation, which is one of our UU values. Transformation is both adapting to change, that's all around us, and being agents of change in the world. So I want to invite our congregation to join together in singing as we depart for our classes. We have both kindergarten through 5th grade and junior youth group today, and little RE is available downstairs in the Mildam space. Let's join in song.
The weight of the world has felt heavy in these days, heavy on the shoulders of each and every one of us who is paying attention. Because I agree with Jack Kornfield that attention and love are tangled up together, pretty much one and the same. Here in this space and time made holy by our shared presence, let us try to lessen the burden, if only for a moment. Let us lean into the care and comfort of community. Let us know that we are not shouldering the burden alone. Let us breathe deeply into this sacred, essential moment now. Even as we collectively carry the weight of the world, some among us are carrying the personal weight of grief, loss, illness, and disappointment. This morning, I invite you to open that spaciousness of your hearts and minds to hold Rose Kratzley and her family in your compassion and care. Rose's uncle, James Kudacheri died peacefully at home on January 18th. I invite you also to hold in that spaciousness of your hearts, in your care and compassion, Bruce Gidley and his family. I received a call this morning from Bruce's son Todd and learned that Bruce took a fall this weekend and has sustained a traumatic head injury and is hospitalized at Leahy. Todd is unable to be with Bruce right now because he is with his mother, Bruce's former wife, Trena Wicks, at a hospital in Tulsa where she is being treated for influenza and pneumonia. The family invites and appreciates your healing prayers and your care and compassion. Blessedly, even in the throes of grief and suffering, life's joys abide. They keep coming. Sometimes we need a little reminding that life's pleasures, great and small, surround us, are within us. So let us take a moment now to mind both the sorrows and the joys that give color and shade to this time in our lives, into this space made meaningful by our presence. I invite each and all of you to share the names and sacred concerns that are on your hearts, either by typing them into the chat or saying them quietly aloud in the space you are in. Once again, let us breathe. I think we need those reminders now more than ever. Let us breathe and let us open that space in our hearts, knowing that it is deep and wide enough to hold all that has been shared in thought and word. And let us, again, be still together, because mindfulness takes practice. So we did it once this morning, and we're going to do it again. Let us be still together for a time of shared and sacred silence. Spirit of life, source of being, gracious God, be with us. Give us the peace that passes understanding and the assurance of those things that never die, that pass from person to person through the generations, right through our own hearts, unto eternity. Beauty, goodness, truth, and most of all, love. Amen. It's the tradition of this congregation that each month we share our plate collection with an organization whose mission expresses our values in the wider world. For the month of February, we thank Patty Keene for nominating South Sudanese Enrichment for Families. And I'm pleased that we have guests here this morning, and I'd like to welcome Susan Winship, Executive Director, to come up to the pulpit and tell us about their mission.
Hi there. The South Sudanese Enrichment for Families has been around for 25 years. My hair was not gray when we started, and we need your help. As you know, the world in upheaval, the country's off balance. There is a very loud drum of anti-refugee and immigrant sentiment. It's horrible. I would like to give you an opportunity to do something about it. Refugee and immigrant desperately need your help now. In 2000, 25 years ago, 100 lost boys from Sudan came to Boston after surviving a genocide and living in a refugee camp for 12 years. They were orphaned, scared, living a totally different culture here. They came from a place that didn't use currency like we do. They came from villages with no electricity, plumbing, jobs, town hall. The weather was different, the food was different, everything is different. Next time you go into an elevator, think about not turning around, how that feels. That's how it feels for them. So SSCF was born when they came to walk with them, to see what their needs are. How can we be helpful to them as a community? The escalating war in Sudan is really hard on this community. Even though many have families there, they go to Sudan for medical care. So the more you hear about the war in Sudan, it definitely affects the South Sudanese in America. So they're always worried about their families there. Climate change, you read in the paper, page 42, that is, about the droughts and the flooding that's happened in South Sudan. That affects their family, and that affects their family. Life here in America, what it's like here being here. They face racism here. As you see, Taban and Najak are here. People are black. They face racism in our communities. I live in Lincoln. It happens all the time. So lack of equal opportunities because the lack of education. So it's hard for them to get ahead and to be educated and get good jobs. Despite the challenges, many have succeeded with their ambition and with the financial help from SSCF. Resettling refugees is not a sprint, it's a marathon. It goes on for generations. The opportunity, come to the coffee hour today. Meet with our two guests, Taban and Garang. I've known them both for many, many years, and they can tell you about their life and tell you about SSCF. We're selling napkins to support our programs, which include great scholarships for preschool, scholarship for camp, summer camp, and scholarship to tuition. We started our new fund for athletics. If you're a size 15 foot, how hard is it to get shoes? It's hard and expensive, I can tell you that. But there are other costs incurred besides the shoes for that. So we will, every Sunday, we'll be speaking. Next couple Sundays, Taban will speak, and your beloved Joke will come back. He misses you all very much. He's part of our community. He's the lost boy, and we miss him very much. He's now in New Hampshire, so I hope you come to that and come visit us at coffee hour. So as you remember in the inauguration, there was a plea to have mercy on refugees. I say, have mercies, come learn and help. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your essential and urgently needed work and mission. Thank you for your presence, for coming to be with us and helping us learn this morning and giving us this opportunity to ask for all that, the good that we seek to do in partnership. Within and beyond these walls, the morning's offering will now be generously given and gratefully received.
Good morning. Our first reading today is a poem by Brad Aaron Maudlin called What You Missed That Day You Were Absent from the Fourth Grade. Mrs. Nelson explained how to stand still and listen to the wind, how to find meaning in pumping gas, how peeling potatoes can be a form of prayer. She took questions on how not to feel lost in the dark. After lunch, she distributed worksheets that covered ways to remember your grandfather's voice. Then the class discussed falling asleep without feeling you had forgotten to do something else, something important. And how to believe the house you wake in is your home. This prompted Mrs. Nelson to draw a chalkboard diagram detailing how to chant the Psalms during cigarette breaks and how not to squirm for sound when your own thoughts are all you hear. Also, that you have enough. The English lesson was that I am is a complete sentence. And just before the afternoon bell, she made the math equation look easy. The one that proves that hundreds of questions and feeling cold and all those nights spent looking for whatever it was you lost and one person all add up to something.
I had an exceptional fourth grade teacher, Ms. Milliken. She made long division fun, I thought. She read Roald Dahl's novel, The Witches, out loud, acting out the parts in such a way, such a convincing way, that I had to wonder if she herself might be at least part witch. Despite this sneaking suspicion, I couldn't help but love her. Fourth grade was a hard year. The first year after my dad moved out, Miss Milliken was calm and steady, caring, tolerant, fun and funny. She never shamed me for all the days of school I missed in fourth grade, or for going to see the nurse at the slightest sign of malaise. As wonderful as she was, she stuck to the standard curriculum, long division, state capitals, the geography of Canada, and of course, her delightful reading. She didn't teach us Mrs. Nelson's heartfelt, soul-filled lessons from the poem that Doug just read for us so magnificently. At least she didn't teach those lessons explicitly. Or maybe she did, and I missed them on one of those many days when I was absent from 4th grade. Mrs. Nelson explained how to stand still and listen on the wind, how to find meaning in pumping gas, how to fall asleep without feeling you had forgotten something else, how to not squirm for sound when your own thoughts are all you hear. That same lesson Amy was teaching us this morning, right? How to open up our hearts, that spaciousness of our hearts, and know that we are held in love. It's a hard thing to teach. I suspect you missed Mrs. Nelson's lessons too. And I suspect the school children of today are missing them even more. School curricula have become more rigid in the era of standardized testing. Teachers have less autonomy and less opportunity for creativity. The focus on rigor and accountability make it ever more difficult for teachers to nurture the hearts and spirits of their students. And all that was before COVID. It's a shame because increasingly we know that all of our hearts and spirits need attention and care, adults and youth alike. According to an advisory by the recently departed U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, we are in the midst of what he calls an epidemic of loneliness and isolation. Loneliness is not a disease, Dr. Murthy acknowledges, but rather a subjective feeling that signals the lack of something we need for survival, or like a wound of our hearts and spirits. We need connection and care to survive and thrive. In these challenging times when all of us are dealing with individual and collective grief, trauma, and increasing fear, not one of us untouched. We might do better to set aside academic rigor, the old values of achievement and success, of racing to the top. We might do better instead to focus on the needs of tender hearts, our own, one another's, and especially our children's. We might do better to cultivate our spirit's capacity for resilience. When so many of us are struggling, when mental health care is in short supply, and when teachers and healthcare professionals are experiencing high rates of burnout, where do we turn to help heal the wounds of lonely hearts and spirits? To whom? Undoubtedly, we need other people to help us, to show up for us, to listen and to care, and we need to be those people for others. But we often forget that we can show up for ourselves. Maybe we need to do that first. We can listen to ourselves, we can extend compassion, care, and love to our own hearts and spirits. We forget to include ourselves first. We forget to show up for ourselves, and we forget to teach our children how to do that for themselves, how to listen to and love their own precious hearts. Which is why I find myself wishing that Mrs. Nelson was here to teach her unconventional lessons. What do you suppose were Mrs. Nelson's educational objectives? You know, if you had to write a standardized curriculum on this stuff, what were the objectives? Here's my take. Mrs. Nelson wanted her students to be able to listen and tend to their deepest selves with openness and care, 2, make meaning from even the mundane moments of their lives, because most of the moments of their lives will be mundane. 3, to gently companion themselves through anxiety, grief, and fear, because life will come with anxiety, grief, and fear. In short, 4, I believe she wanted her students to be able to love themselves. Love of self is a topic many of us find hard to talk about, and maybe that's why it's not generally taught in our 4th grade classrooms or included in any of the public school curricula. In a book I've been mentioning almost every week in here, I think, called All About Love by Bell Hooks, she admits that the chapter on self-love was, quote, the most difficult to write. When I talked with friends and acquaintances about self-love, she says, I was surprised to see how many of us feel troubled by the notion, as though the very idea implies too much narcissism or selfishness. The author and Rabbi Alan Lurie expresses the same ambivalence. Isn't self-love the root of greed and abuse? And doesn't loving oneself mean complacency and an end of the desire to change and improve? I wrote here that I share their ambivalence. That's not true. I used to have that ambivalence. I don't anymore. In light of the enormous challenges facing our nation and our planet and our human family, self-love can seem to smack of self-indulgence and navel-gazing, but if we leave it at that, it's at our peril. According to both Bell Hooks and Rabbi Lurie, our ambivalence about self-love arises from a misunderstanding about the true meaning of love. So we've been working a lot on this. What do we mean when we lift up this word love? What do we mean precisely? Too often, Bell Hooks and Rabbi Lurie contend we confuse love with a need for acceptance and approval that arises from our fears of rejection, abandonment, and worthlessness. This need, they contend, usually has roots in deficiencies of external love experienced during childhood. And when directed inward, this false notion of love, this need for approval and acceptance, it can manifest as greed or narcissism. But genuine love, on the other hand, is an intentional commitment. In All About Love, Bell Hooks uses that definition that I told you I was going to keep bringing up here. You might know it by heart now, some of you who have been here over the last several weeks. Love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. That came to Hooks via M. Scott Peck. Rabbi Lurie has a similar definition. He calls true love the commitment to know, experience, and contribute as deeply as possible to the growth of someone or something. And that someone can be oneself. When we apply that definition inward, we arrive at an understanding of self-love as an intentional commitment to nurture one's own growth. Grounded in that self-love, Hooks contends, when we know how to love ourselves and help ourselves grow, we're freed from that fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment, and we can reach out to others and the wider world from a place of fulfillment, she writes, and not from a place of lack. This is not new wisdom. It's as old as the most familiar words from Christianity. Love your neighbor as yourself. These words are more anciently rooted in Jewish teaching and mirrored in nearly all the world's major religions. Love your neighbor as you love yourself, not just love your neighbor. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. To love your neighbor, you have to know how to love yourself. It sounds simple enough, yet how can we love our neighbors as ourselves if we don't know how to love ourselves in the first place? How often do we stop and reflect upon if and how we love ourselves? How often do we notice what it looks like and feels like to love ourselves? It's not something we're taught in school, even when we show up every single day in 4th grade.
Mending by Nancy Schaefer. How shall we mend you, sweet soul? What shall we use, and how is it in the first place you've come to be torn? Come, sit. Come, tell me. We will find a way to mend you. I would offer you so much, sweet soul. This banana sliced in rounds of palest yellow atop hot cereal, or these raisins scattered through it if you'd rather. Would offer cellos in the background, singing melodies Vivaldi heard and wrote for us to keep. Would hold out to you everything colored blue or lavender or light green. All of this I would offer you, sweet soul. All of it or any piece of it might mend you. I would offer you, sweet soul, this chair by the window, this sunlight on the floor, and the cat asleep in it. I would offer you my silence, my presence, all this love I have, and my sorrow you've become torn. How shall we mend you, sweet soul? With these, I think, gently we can begin. We will mend you with a rocking chair, some raisins, a cat, a field of lavender beginning now to bloom. We will mend you with songs remembered entirely the first time ever they are heard. We will mend you with pieces of your own sweet self, sweet soul, with what you've taught from the very beginning.
Turns out it's okay that we missed Mrs. Nelson's 4th grade lesson, as the reading that Susan just shared so powerfully suggests. It's not too late. Mrs. Nelson is not the only teacher with expertise on matters of self-love, and in fact, she's not even the best teacher. To find the best teacher, you need only to shift your gaze inward. Your best teacher is inside of you. In that poem, Mending, Nancy Schaefer invites her sweet soul to come, sit, come tell me. Her sweet soul is her teacher, the one who can advise her on how best to mend the wounds of her spirit. We will mend you with pieces of your own sweet self, sweet soul, and what you've taught from the very beginning. I often draw on the teachings of Parker Palmer and the Quaker spiritual tradition that informs his work. Palmer's teachings center on the concept of the inner teacher, that still small voice within each one of us that knows us most intimately and truly. The inner teacher knows what we need to grow and to heal, to work and to rest, to create and to love. We don't need an outside teacher to instruct us on these matters, but we do need to learn how to listen to the voice of our own sweet soul, the lessons of our own inner teacher. At the age of 41, I had the good fortune of being able to go to seminary. The curriculum at Meadville Lombard Theological School focused at least as much on what they called formation, personal development, as academic rigor. The most emphatic lesson I took away was to engage in regular spiritual practice. No one taught me what that practice should be or how I should do it. Instead, my teachers and mentors simply advised again and again that I must take time and space on a consistent basis to focus inwardly. I was wary at first. I was afraid I wouldn't be any good at spiritual practice. I was an unruly meditator, had never done yoga with any consistency, started and promptly stopped more gratitude journals than I can count. I just moved them all from my old house in a big empty box because they have like 2 pages each and I don't want to waste all that paper. Shame and self-doubt took over as I went looking for love in all the wrong places, seeking acceptance and approval by, getting it right, excelling, instead of committing to nurture my own growth. Eventually, just out of desperation, I began to embrace practices better suited to my inclinations and temperament. Walking the wooded path by my home at least once a week with no music or other people, just the company of my own thoughts. Starting each morning in fair weather with candlelight and a cup of tea on my back porch, awakening my spirit with the rising sun and the morning breeze. Jack Cornfield, whose lessons Amy drew on earlier, says that it is possible, quote, to speak with our hearts directly, to converse with our heart as if it were a good friend. Eventually, I came to understand my spiritual practices as sacred time that I set aside to converse with my heart as I would with a good friend, without judging myself for self-indulgence. I offer my heart the respect, care, affection, attention, and trust that I would extend, and I do extend, to my good friends. Not all friends are created equal, however. Just as there is false love, there are also false friends. The ones who say what we want to hear to win our acceptance and approval, who aren't genuinely invested in our growth and well-being. We can just as readily be a false friend to ourselves, reverting back to ingrained habits of self-protection rooted in fears of abandonment and rejection. No one else can teach you how to love yourself. Not Mrs. Nelson, not Nancy Schaefer, not me. Only you can do that. But I would like to impress upon you the lesson I learned in seminary. I can remind you and urge you toward a regular practice of befriending yourself. We can all do that for one another. So in that vein, I have 5 tips, a curriculum, if you will, a syllabus for being your own best teacher and friend. Think of them as my notes from that day you were absent from my seminary. 1, just show up for yourself. Show up for yourself. Good friends make time to show up for one another, not just in body, but with real attention. Remember, love and attention. To be a good friend to yourself, you need to be fully present to yourself, at least Sometimes that means unplugging all of your devices and finding a quiet space where you can hear your own heart song. Like any two friends, you and your heart will need to figure out what you like to do together. Your heart probably already knows. Perhaps a long walk or a jog, a cup of tea, some quiet meditation, journaling, coloring, gardening, even doing the dishes in a warm sink full of soapy water. Number 2, so 1 was show up for yourself. Number 2, get to know yourself. Good friends are curious about us. They want to know our values, interests, and passions. To be a good friend to yourself, make time and space to ask your heart what it really cares about. It's so easy to lose touch with our deepest values in the grind of daily routine and in a world that reinforces consumerism. Make time to reconnect to the values and interests that inspire you to grow and transform. So show up for yourself. Get to know yourself. Number 3, honor your struggles with compassion. Good friends bear witness to our struggles and hardship. They don't gloss over or minimize them, and they don't berate us when we're experiencing them. To be a good friend to yourself, bear witness to your own suffering. Everyone suffers. Yours is real. Bear witness without shame or judgment, but with tenderness and care. Show up for yourself, get to know yourself, honor your struggles with compassion. Number 4, I think this is the hardest one. Be honest with yourself. In my experience, it's a rare friend who is willing to call us out for our you-know-what. But if a friend is really committed to our growth, they will take the risk of upsetting us by telling us the truth in love. To be a good friend to yourself, be honest with yourself when you miss the mark. You'll know because your feelings of shame or guilt will signal your misstep. Instead of escaping or burying those feelings, gently name the misstep. Offer yourself the compassion that is yours to freely give. And then set your course to right once more. Figure out how to make amends. Mending. Okay, we're almost there. Show up for yourself. Get to know yourself. Honor your struggles with compassion. Be honest with yourself. And steer yourself out of harm's way. Good friends look out for us and help us to avoid the dangers in our midst, even the little dangers. They're the friends who let us know when we have a piece of parsley stuck in our teeth or toilet paper clinging to our shoe. Be that friend to yourself. Point out the imposter voices of self-defeat that are trying to dishonor your dignity and sabotage your growth, and silence them. Remind yourself, as a good friend would, always, of the truth of your inherent worth and lovability. Show up for yourself. Get to know yourself. Honor your struggles with compassion. Be honest with yourself. And steer yourself out of harm's way as best as you can. I wish all of us could have had a 4th grade teacher like Mrs. Nelson, one who might have steered us towards practices of self-love and self-befriending when we were young and impressionable. But it is never too late to start. We are always ready to learn and grow year upon year in all the seasons and cycles of our lives. We can always give ourselves the foundation of love and care that we need. So as we emerge from the pandemic, already weary and wounded, and face the steep challenges that are before us in these fraught political times, the world needs people who can reach out to others, as Hook urges, from a place of fulfillment and not from a place of lack. And we can take responsibility by loving ourselves. Let us commit to our own fulfillment, not selfishly, greedily, or narcissistically, but rather in the service of healing, our own and the world's. Let us commit to listen to our own hearts and one another's. Let us commit to nurture our own growth, the growth of our own spirits and one another's. Let us commit to be gardeners of peace, justice, mercy, beauty, tenderness, and joy. We learn to do that by beginning to tend the fertile soil of our own hearts. That's where we learn love's lessons best. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Don't leave yourself out of that most fundamental spiritual equation. Love your neighbor as yourself. And from that inner place of fulfillment, may each one of us bring our blooming hearts to bear on a world aching for our love and care. May it be so. Our closing words come from a contemporary scholar of Islamic mysticism who is also has been a contributor to the podcast On Being, which is also a source of some of the amazing poetry that I like to share, and you heard one of them today. So this is from Omid Safi. Go, be your best self. Be your most beautiful self. Be your luminous self. Be your most generous self. Be your most radically loving self. And when you fall short of that, as we all do, as we all have, bounce back and return again. There is a grace in this returning to your luminous self. Please rise in body or spirit and join in our closing hymn, How Could Anyone Ever Tell You? And that miracle of our loving abides always around us, within us. May we always and again return to it. Let us close as is our tradition, by giving and receiving the words of benediction that are the tradition of this religious community. Go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings. Please be seated and enjoy the postlude as our worship comes to its close.